Hello, Wednesday Wanderers. It's Ranger Erin, and today's wonder is what are dead trees good for? And it turns out that even though they're dead, they give life to the rest of the forest. So they're very important in our forest ecosystems. So even though a dead tree isn't alive anymore, it's still a very important habitat for a long time for lots of our critters that like to climb up in trees or fly. So our owls, our woodpeckers, our bats, our raccoons, opossums, they're all going to find some safety roosting in our trees. But then it's also going to be a good food source for some of our bugs that are going to want to eat them. Now, a standing dead tree has a special name. We call that a snag. So when it's still standing, we call it a snag. When it eventually gets kind of eaten up and soft and falls over and then lays on the forest floor, that's going to be called a log. So they have special names whether they're standing up or whether they're laying down. And even though we'll cut a dead tree down, if it's too close to a trail because we don't want anybody to get hit when it does decide to fall down, we'd like to try and leave them up whenever possible because, again, that's really great habitat for our animals and a really good food source for a lot of those other animals. Dead trees, or snags, provide a great roost for creatures like these vultures. This dead sycamore still stands along the bank that it lived its whole life on. Right now, it's still holding that bank in place, keeping the water from eroding the soil from beneath it. Eventually, that tree is going to fall, and like the trees over here, they're going to provide some opportunities for slowing the water down. So while that might be a hazard for some of our creek goers, our canoers, and kayakers, it's important for our aquatic animals that they have some slower moving water. So some animals, like our snapping turtles, will really appreciate some slower moving water. Let's explore this big tree behind us a little bit more. So here on the ground, and then it goes up and up and up. And that's one of our snags. We'll walk a little bit closer. We're going to walk by this really skinny one first. And I can see lots and lots of holes, especially up here at the top. So that's been some great habitat for our woodpeckers to peck on, searching for their bugs. And then in all these little nooks and crannies that you see in here, that's going to be some great roosting sites for a lot of other animals. So maybe a snake would take a break in there. We've got some old fungus over here. So fungus are also going to really depend on these types of trees. And then, oh wow, this dark cavern in here, that would be just perfect for some of our bats to roost in. And we're also going to talk about logs, because even though there's lots of food to be had and lots of opportunities for animals to have on those snags when they're still standing upright, once it hits the ground and we call it that log, there's even more opportunities. So then all of our ground-dwelling decomposers are going to be able to get in there and chew on it a little bit more. Now this giant log has a very special name. This is called a nursery log. Because if you notice, right up here, I've got some little seedlings that are starting to grow. So there's a young box elder that has planted itself right on this tree. Because this tree, that wood is starting to soften and break down and it's making its own soil, and this tree is going to provide all the nutrients for this young tree. So this big dead monster of a tree, it's so large, it has all this good nutrients in it that's kind of like the vitamins for our plants. They're going to feed these young trees so that they can take their place in the forest. I've got a nice fat log that's on the ground over here, and I'm going to tip it over to see what's underneath it. Because just like those snags are going to provide shelter for lots of animals that are up high, these logs on the ground are going to provide shelter for other animals that can't quite climb up on those trees. So things like salamanders and snakes and chipmunks and all different types of creatures are going to take shelter in here. But I want you to listen to my technique first. So I'm going to walk up here and I'm going to grab this log and I'm going to roll it towards me. So if there's anything that's dangerous in there, I'm going to have a log in between myself and whatever it is, because we just don't know what it's going to be. So I got a hold of it, I'm rolling it towards myself, and then we'll peek underneath here. First thing I see is this big old worm. Right next to that, there's a few millipedes that are all curled up. I see some plants that are starting to sprout on the underside of this. Ooh, there's a big old snail over here. There's a lot of life going on in here. There's another curled up millipede. Very cute. Lots of sow bugs and ants. Another tiny little millipede. Ooh, there's a hunter in here. That's a centipede right there, and he's gonna hunt these other animals. They probably don't even know that he's in here. Wow, so many millipedes. And this is going to be our first activity for you. So wherever you are, if you head out to the forest, if you do it in your backyard, you're going to find a big old log. Make sure that it's not somebody's precious log, that you're not going to mess with that. And you're going to roll it towards yourself very carefully. If it's very big, ask for some adult help. And then I want you to record, either draw or write down all the little critters that you see, or maybe just signs of critters. You could do this with a snag as well. And just take a peek, look for any of those little markings, holes like this were probably made by a woodpecker when this was still attached to a tree. And you just want to write all of that down. And if you really liked this activity, this is a great activity to do throughout the year. So you come back and you visit that same log once a month and you write down how it's changed, and it might start to decay a whole lot more. Like this one probably came from the same tree. It's very soft. I'm going to roll it towards myself. Wow. It's like a millipede nursery. Another hunter. That centipede. Lots and lots of millipedes. But it'll be a little bit different each time you visit it. After you get finished exploring underneath some logs out in the forest, you can record some of what you see in today's activity, which is a peekaboo log scene in the forest. So I've got lots of ferns and flowers and things like that underneath my log. We're going to be able to lift that up, and then just like what we did in the forest, you can see some critters in there. I've got some eggs, I've got that centipede, a spider's web, some sow bugs, roly-polies, a worm, a millipede, and then I pretended that I found a salamander today. And you can kind of put whatever you think you might find underneath that log, or those things that you actually did find underneath that log. So in order to get started with this, you're just going to start off with some plain paper, and you're going to make a log flap. Now I used cardboard, and in my other version I kind of shredded the top of it because I thought that it looked like bark. You don't need to do that, and if you don't have any cardboard at all, then you can just stick with plain old construction paper. So I've already kind of traced the outline of my shape. That's where my log scene is going to be. I can move this out of the way, and whatever you're doing, I used watercolor paint, but you can color this with crayon. You can just draw it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a worm in here. A really long squiggly one. I'm going to put another one of those millipede spirals in there. Maybe, I didn't do any beetles in my other one, so I'll do a big old beetle. And when you get finished coloring all of that in, however it's going to look, you're just going to take a strip of tape and you're going to attach your log on top of your picture so that you can let those little critters hide, and then when you open up, you can see them. And I'll show you what that finished one looks like. This is what mine looked like with the cardboard flap. Flipping it up, you see all those little critters, but they stay hidden just like they want to be.